What strengthens the India-US partnership is that through Vajpayee, Manmohan Singh, Modi, nothing changed. Through Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden, nothing changed. This is the bipartisan nature of our relationship. This is a visit that has a potential to shape the political landscape as well as the technology landscape for the future.
Yeah.
I think one of the central purposes of the nuclear deal was to announce this new appreciation or the new assessment of the role of India. It was not to really do nuclear trade. I think when it comes to China, relying on Western nations is dangerous. They are compromised. Even now, half of them are literally apologists for China. At a particular point of time, not too far away from now, India will have to be attracting a lot of global talent into India. We may make in India, but we will make with everyone. As India, we need to now, in the next 10 years, keep grabbing opportunities. I think our problem is, like the commentariat that is writing about the 20th century, even some of our bureaucracy is living in the 20th century. It seems that the Pakistani television channels are far more appreciative of what we do than our own TV and media and commentariat is. We need to look at Africa and the countries in that continent as the most vital and important partners for us in the decades ahead. The US-Europe partnership, the US-Japanese partnership served the first 1 billion. The India-US partnership is a partnership for the next 6.5 to 7 billion.
Namaste, Jai Hind. Welcome to another edition of ANI Podcast with Smita Prakash. As the Indian Prime Minister heads to the US on a state visit, there is renewed interest on India's relationship with the most powerful nation on this planet. The US has termed its relationship with India as its most consequential one with any country. To explain to us the ramifications of the visit, listen in to this podcast with Samir Saran, the president of the Observer Research Foundation, India's premier think tank. Samir curates the Raisina Dialogue, which has become the annual flagship event on geopolitics. Samir's area of expertise is on India's foreign policy, technology, global governance, and climate change. Samir, thank you so much for being part of the podcast. I've been after you for so long now. Aajo podcast. Where thankfully now you're here, and that also just before a PM visit. So let's begin. And I want to get your view about what you think, where you see the India-US relationship going. What about the visit of PM Modi to the US? What do you think are the main focus areas?
Smita, first, thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for genuinely inviting me for the first time this time, and I have come.
Okay.
So next time when you want me, you should again send me an invitation where you genuinely want me to come.
Email,
नहीं
WhatsApp.
दिल से बुलाओ, हम आ जाएंगे.
हाँ जी, जरूर.
So आपने बुलाया, हम हाजिर हुए, और it so happens that we are meeting at the eve of a big visit. Certainly, as far as I'm concerned, and as I've written in my piece that appeared yesterday, that this is a visit that has a potential to shape the political landscape as well as the technology landscape for the future. There is no doubt in my mind that the 21st century is basically about, as far as Indians are concerned, two relationships. How we manage China and how we partner with the US. And I think these are the two equations we need to manage well if we need to ensure that we are in a position where we can shape outcomes, where we can contribute to global requirements, where we can serve the larger human needs, and where, of course, we can meet the aspirations of a very young India that is more demanding and louder and impatient in some ways. So this partnership is clearly something that is important for all of this. And what is it that is different this time? I think the last visit was 2016, a good 8 years ago or 7 years ago.
And wasn't a state visit.
It wasn't a state visit, and it was at a very different time. In 7 years, a lot has changed. Europe is very different. It looks very different. What's happening there? China in 7 years, oh my God.
Yeah.
It's a breakout nation in terms of its economic muscles, in terms of its aggressiveness, in terms of its expansiveness, in terms of its presence all over the world. The Belt and Road Initiative, the debt trap diplomacy, the Wolf Warrior communications, capturing US universities, UK universities, media houses, There was a fascinating presentation that Shamika had given at one of our, convenings. And it was really interesting to see that while all of us in the free world, the US, EU, India, were taking a beating as far as media coverage was concerned, the sentiment of the overall coverage of a country was concerned, China was doing well. Through the pandemic, post the pandemic,
It's like a covert napalm bombing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The Chinese term is borrowed the boat to cross the sea. They were literally owning all our boats. Our boats were serving the Chinese cause. I would see that I would take a strong position on the matter of the pandemic against the Chinese, and suddenly I could see a plethora of articles that were targeting my colleagues and ORF and others. You could see the power of the Communist Party and its muscle and political and money might at work.
Platforms had been grabbed.
Platforms were grabbed, media houses were grabbed. The Chinese had banned domestic travel in January of 2020, but the WHO was telling the world to still allow China into their countries. So Chinese had not allowed people from Wuhan to move into different parts.
Surreptitiously, China was going about doing this, you're saying?
Yes, not surreptitiously. China had taken out public notices.
Yeah.
And at the same time, at the same moment, we had WHO notices telling people not to do this. It would impact this. Don't worry, it will be fine.
We never saw this. Forget we don't have the resources. But even the Western nations, they didn't see this coming. They must have known that the WHO was getting in.
When it comes to China, relying on Western nations is dangerous. They are compromised. Even now, half of them are literally apologists for China. Even now, when even Biden, who is far more careful in terms of how he says things, what he says, how to approach them. And by the way, he's not easy on them. He's taken quite a tough line on China, and more power to him. But you could literally see his own Democrat commentariat trying to find ways of convincing the leadership that somehow China is a great bet to make, great friend to have, a great partner in these difficult times. China is not a partner. China is playing for the house. And China is not seeking partnerships in the 21st century.
Domination minus the US.
Correct. China is not looking at G2. China is looking at G1. And those days are gone when the Democrats wanted Obama to go to China and propose a division of assets. That is gone. That is not on the table anymore.
Yeah.
And therefore, in fact, I remember being in a conversation with Joe Johnson, who was doing a report for King's and some other institutions. And he had told me how academia and research and even key fundamental critical labs in the country were literally being dominated by Chinese grants and Chinese money and Chinese payouts to individual professors or staff members or others.
So in this scenario, when China already has this domination, they have an antagonistic attitude towards India because of various reasons. Modi's an anathema, and then Modi is visiting there with the state visit. So you can be certain that there will be stuff that they will be doing, whether using the platforms, think tanks, street protests against the Prime Minister.
Look, the Chinese will be using their entire gamut of options, whether it is to get American voices to protest against this visit, whether it is to get voices from here or from other parts of the world to agitate matters. China will use that option. China will also, don't be surprised if China suddenly appears on some part of the Indian border once again. The Chinese are going to be relentless. The Chinese have a very clear worldview. For them, multipolarity in the world is fine, but multipolarity in Asia is not on the table. Asia has to be unipolar. Right? They can still talk about when they go to BRICS and when they go to SCO and when they go to their other groupings, they can talk about how the world has to be multipolar, etc. But remember, as far as Asia is concerned, it has to be the Middle Kingdom, and then the rest are vassals who pay tribute to the emperor. It's a Middle Kingdom reincarnated.
As bizarre as it might sound, it is the reality.
It is the reality. It is a Middle Kingdom reincarnated. Now,
and then you have America, changing Asia Pacific to India Pacific. So obviously India is the target.
I think the Americans, to be honest here, this is not a knee-jerk reaction. I think I think it's a good point to talk about America. I think this is a good moment to talk about them. Look, Americans have the street, which could be free and loud and crazy, obnoxious, everything. All shades of good and bad and ugly, the street. But America has a elite, has a strategic elite. And this is not elite in terms of money. This is elite in terms of how they think about the nation and how they think about the nation's future. That elite is steadfast. It is far more certain of what it wants to do. In fact, you should look at the continuity between Trump and Biden. There is nothing similar about the two gentlemen.
True.
The two parties were literally, they would have fought a war if that was allowed in American elections. If you were allowed to pick up arms and shoot each other instead of voting, they would have done that.
Yeah.
But look, they are so different, and yet you see the continuity in American foreign policy from one regime to the next, from one establishment to the next, from one party to the next. You saw the continuity. Trump, literally everything he did in foreign policy terms, be it China, be it demanding greater investment by Europeans in NATO. Look at what Trump did, and has it been reversed? No. So I think the Americans, in some sense, assessed this moment where they knew that the Chinese are now beginning to assert themselves and are going to therefore need to be managed in a different manner. Asia Pacific was a term and a political map and a strategy that was to work with the markets of Asia, the economies of Asia, to in some ways preserve the Western Pacific architecture of that America thought was beneficial to them, and therefore Asia Pacific worked at that time. But they could sense that the Chinese ambitions were not limited to that part of the world.
When the conflicts on the East Asia Sea and all those had started.
Correct. They knew that was a trailer. And they were right. Here you have China creating peace deals in the Middle East. Here you have China's ambition to reshape Central Asia. Here you have Chinese trains reaching Western Europe. And in a previous age, it would have been called an invasion. When you have thousands of Chinese landing on your on a train in your station, you would have thought this is a military movement. But now they are welcomed. They are greeted in those countries. They could sense all of this happening, and they knew that the management or the political management of the future cannot be served by the 1945 arrangements that had been put into place. They needed a 21st century upgrade. The operating system needed a reboot and a new update. And the Indo-Pacific, in many ways, was an acknowledgement of that. The Indo-Pacific was an acknowledgement that the political map had changed, and the political map of both opportunity and contest is much bigger than the Asia-Pacific. It would include the Indian Ocean, Africa, the Mediterranean, through the Arabian Sea, through the Suez Canal, Southern Europe. Right? India, of course, and the islands here, they were all critical to now this new political map that would be both an opportunity landscape as well as a contest landscape. But secondly, they also assessed correctly that the actors who would need to be in place would be very different. This was not the American political establishment knew that they needed new partnerships. They needed, in some ways, to rethink the alliance framework that had served them in the past to a new modern partnership framework that would serve them in the future. And India was a key part of that puzzle. They knew that. So it is not coincidental that in the 90s, towards the end of Clinton administration, the George Bush presidency years, Obama, Trump, Biden, one thing has remained consistent and strong: the centrality of India in the American visualization of the future. So this is not something that has happened now. This was something that had been underway for a while. It has become more acute and far more visible today. But the American strategic thinking had taken a long call, in fact.
And not seeing India with the prism of Pakistan.
That too. So the dehyphenation was essential for them, right?
And China. Suddenly the positioning of India with
I would
regard
argue
to China.
that the central purpose of the nuclear deal, and there were many other purposes, but I think one of the central purposes of the nuclear deal was to announce this new appreciation or the new assessment of the role of India. It was not to really do nuclear trade.
Yeah.
How many nuclear plants will you trade, boss?
And even when they were doing it, everybody was like, okay, this is starting, but the actual nuclear trade will happen with Europe.
Or with
They will
Russia, or
step
with
in.
France, or with right?
They will
So,
be the first ones,
correct,
and that's what
correct,
happened actually.
Correct.
You know,
So,
that,
so look, the Americans were
Yeah.
clear-eyed about this.
Yeah.
It was not about the civil nuclear sector.
trade as such,
It
yeah.
was about putting to rest and clearing the debris from the 20th century, where in fact India had been sanctioned on a number of occasions.
The nuclear apartheid.
Correct.
Yeah.
It had been sanctioned.
Yeah.
So it was to close that chapter of the book. In fact, it was to archive that book and put it away. I think to throw away that playbook of the 20th century and to say we are starting afresh. And I think that was the real purpose of the deal at that particular point of time.
Samir, two things which I want to bring in. One was, when we used to cover these international summits close to the turn of the century and later, the view always was that India always has played a shrinking violet, not lived up to the expectations that Asia has, or the South, global South. Now we keep hearing about global South. The global South has, it just doesn't stand up. We were caught in our own hesitation, baggage of the 20th century, the non-alignment, all those things that has happened. Have things changed as far as India is concerned? The West, yes, what they view India. Have we changed?
We have to go back to the West a little bit, to the US specifically.
Okay.
Look, when US was making this decision to suddenly reimagine and then brand India in a particular way, it had to sell it to its constituencies, to its partners, to its own people. They have to. End of the day, they also have to go for elections, right? Today, they may be fighting it on different issues, but in the 20th century, you have to understand that in America, India was seen as a country
Russian
close
bloc.
to the it was seen as a country close to the Soviet bloc. It was seen as a country which was not on their side, right?
And
So,
mercurial in its
correct.
in its reactions, as
irreverent,
foreign.
mercurial,
Yeah.
not towing the line,
Yeah.
having a mind of its own,
Caught up in red tapeism, not
etc.,
moving.
etc., etc.
Huh.
Now, when they had to rebrand India, they had to, like everything America does, and I think let's be honest here, there is no better country in the world when it comes to branding, right?
Okay.
So whether it's the Apple product or whether it is the American Football League or whether it is the NBA. They are past masters.
Absolutely.
They are past masters, right?
I can't
Building
say
brands.
this more because seeing The Economist, if you haven't seen it as yet, viewers, just take a look at it. So we have moved from snake charmers to this aggressive tiger
now, right?
right? The branding.
नहीं मैंने तो वही बोला कि अगली बारी कोई आएगा इंडिया में तो मैं तो वही फोटो अपने टी शर्ट में पहन के घूम रहा हूँ देख लो टाइगर है जंगलों में ढूंढ रहे हो
देखो शेर आया
शेर आया वो इकोनॉमिस्ट का ही लेके घूमूंगा मैं फ्रंट कवर no but
Yeah, coming back to it, yes.
so what the Americans did as they do in every branding and exercise and enterprise, they over leveraged India. They in fact exaggerated the importance of India in 2000. And they kind of positioned India of 2020 at that point of time.
Oh.
That this is a big economy, this is a rising economy, it's a technology superpower, it has young population. So they took, like share valuation होती है वो future returns के ऊपर होती है.
हाँ.
India की भी future capabilities को उनने उसी दिन leverage कर दिया.
And we were like, भाई हम तो वो नहीं है.
देखो boss, we all like praise, right? So we all enjoy that, right?
Okay.
So even we were basking in sometimes.
But we weren't ready for it actually.
No, so now listen, when you start positioning India of 2020 in 2000 itself,
Yeah.
then people expect your performance as per 2020.
Correct.
And you are performing at the levels that you can. If you're a $1 trillion economy and you're being leveraged as a $3 trillion economy, then you're going to only deliver 1/3. So
Yeah.
one of the elements is that because we were branded to be this, country with a swag
Yeah.
of 20 years later, before our time, there may have been some disappointment. That's one part of it. The second part, of course, is that look, even we have to reimagine our role in the world, right? So here we were the head of the global trade union, non-aligned movement, Bandung process. कोई भी international trade union हो, उसका leader India होता था.
Now it sounds so
Right?
bizarre.
No, but that's true,
True.
right? So
Yeah.
even we had to change our own imagination of ourselves. even that takes time, right?
Right.
So, my brother who returned to India 5 years ago from the US after living there for, 20, 25 years, when he came back, he told me, Samir, the young people here are so different. They know what they want. They have a strong view about their country's role in the world. They have a strong view about their country's future. They are demanding. They have aspirations. They are impatient. They are very clear that they will not do certain things. If the job is substandard, they will not do it. So he saw that the young people are very different when they write to me on social media, when they write to me on personal messages. I wouldn't have the confidence to send these messages to someone like me when I was a 20-year-old. So he says, you see a far more confident India today. So that is the second part.
In a hurry.
That India in 2002, 2003, 2004, 2010, 2015 was certainly relatively more reticent than it is today. Each year, every 5 years, I think you are going to see a more, certainly more vocal because, we love our voice. But also more confident India. We have not seen like again, I'm coming back to that conversation. We haven't seen strife for years. We haven't seen again the paper. We haven't seen the daily battle for survival. Whether it's food or whether it is the rations or whether it is, and you and I both have been in homes, in middle class homes, and we would remember we used to carry a grain of wheat and we used to go to the chakki, make
where
it
you had one brand of toothpaste, one brand of ketchup, and stand in line for milk.
Yes.
All those
and we used to go to canning centers and get tomato ketchup made because we couldn't buy retail ketchup.
And there was no branded biscuits, maybe now, one or two.
So how much swagger can you have as a country?
As a country.
Right.
True.
So my point is that we had to also rethink.
So all those socialists today who, complain about the crass capitalism of today, they've nicely gloss over that.
Look. No. Let's be very clear here. We are doing injustice. Socialists of those years were the only ones who had access to privilege. Like in any good socialist communist arrangement, the thinking elite live very differently to the cadres. Their thinking and their living were not necessarily in sync with each other. So many of those never had to really bother about all of this. So the fact today is that you have today services on your mobile phone that required a minister's letter to access in the 20th century. We are coming from that India where literally breathing was a privilege. अगर आपने सांस ज़्यादा ले ली तो वो किसी की privilege थी.
And like when I went to the US, we have our COVID certificate on our phone. In America, it's a parchi still. There are many things right and many things wrong. But what I feel is that there used to be nothing that we did right in those days.
When I'm sitting overseas, my favorite experiment is that any colleague of mine who's traveling with me, I would put them across the table. I would tell them, please show them your phone, which service provider you're using. I will show them my phone, which service provider I'm using. I said, please tell them which bank you use. I will tell them which bank I use. And I'll send money across the table and we'll be sending one rupee to each other through the meeting, telling them this is the... So look, coming back to the point. So India was also going through a period of adjusting to its new realities. A reality which was looking far more wholesome, the prospects which were far more positive than they had been in 50 years of our existence since our independence. So the second challenge was that if we were not assertive or if we were shrinking away from being heard or taking a role in certain conversations that were critical in the global stage, it was also because we were not used to the new role that we were having to play.
And it's all linked to the economy too, right?
The economy also linked to the politics
and
of our time. And politics of our time, right?
Yeah.
And the third reason, and politics of our time, and the third reason, for the longest time, because we were coming out of a phase in global history where many of us were actually attaining freedom for the first time, and there was a degree of solidarity that had defined our early years. We were walking together, we were journeying together, and that led to the various organizations that were built up. We were also loath to move away from the group when we could have. There was literally some sort of political guilt that, I can now be slightly different. I
Also,
have
there's
done a little
security
better.
in status quo, right?
Correct. And,
Yeah.
and you want to be with the herd, right? You don't
Yeah.
want to leave the herd. And you also feel guilty about leaving the herd. That why is it that I am now 3x the size of many countries who used to be the same per capita income as me at that particular point of time, or the fact that because I'm a large population, I have an economic muscle disproportionate to my income, per capita incomes, or because of my geography and because of my prowess in science and technology and defense and IT, as we spoke, we have a global relevance which is different to agri-based economies or economies based on fisheries and others, or tourism alone, right? So India had not only grown and not only matured and not only developed certain skills, Indian industry, Indian economic side, I'm saying the market side of India, was beginning to contribute as well. That engine was finally firing. We had in many ways escaped the shackles of the public sector undertakings and its kind of a retarding impact on our existence. So I think the 1991 reforms were beginning to kick in a generation. So by the end of...
What were the breaks? I mean, here you had a Prime Minister in Dr. Manmohan Singh who ushered in the reforms when...
as a finance minister.
Yeah, Narasimha Rao was the Prime Minister. Here he almost staked his government for the nuclear deal.
Correct.
He was putting the relationship on track. Where were the breaks that happened? Why didn't that upward trajectory continue in the second term of the UPA? And why did it take that muscular foreign policy of Modi to put it back on track?
Look,
if I say it went off track or slowed down.
I'll be honest here. First of all, till 2008, I was more interested in the corporate sector and business sector and less interested in the going-ons in geopolitics and politics. But look, there are two distinct periods. One was Manmohan Singh first term and the Vajpayee era.
Yeah.
And you can kind of club them together.
Yes.
Which were quite similar.
Yeah.
And you're right, it shows a continuity and a maturity that you took a project that may have been started under Prime Minister Vajpayee, and Manmohan Singh took it to fruition, the civil nuclear deal, right? So he staked his government. He was willing to stand against the left lobby in Parliament and make it happen. And I think that phase was one phase of India. I have a suspicion that what happened post 2009, the second UPA term, there was a resurgence of the other side of the Congress party, of the left-leaning socialist side of the Communist Party, that somehow made Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and those who believed in a progressive economic and political framework for the future guilty of wanting more for the country. I think the idea that somehow because we are a country which has a certain reality of poverty, deprivation, etc. in 2008, 2009, much more than we have today, by the way. So it was 12 years ago was a very different India again.
Yeah.
So because there was this large, hundreds of millions of folks who were outside, I think that idea was used both as a tool and a means of changing some of the key policies, but also as a way of instilling a more reluctant and reticent Indian story.
तो फिर हो गया ना, so then hiccups come.
नहीं, मुझे तो लगता है because Manmohan Singh had staked his government and had won, and in fact, I think, if I remember correctly, 2009, the Congress party did much better than it did in 2004 in terms of numbers.
Yeah.
And I think that may have been the undoing of Prime Minister Manmohan Singh.
Yeah,
because,
maybe he was tired, he couldn't fight anymore.
Look, that's history. But I think what happened between 2009 to 2014 was two things. Number one, there were political consequences, and we saw the rise of the Bharatiya Janata Party as a consequence in 2014. But I'm not someone who follows.
But India-US relations, if there was a slide down.
Look,
at that time.
If you remember, it was at that particular point of time, exactly at that point of time, when Obama, who had just been elected in 2008, if I remember correctly, Obama making a visit to China, I don't remember the exact year, 2009 maybe, to Shanghai, and suggesting the G2 If you look at that period when the Americans started toying with the idea of accommodating the rise of China, of trying to manage the neighborhood with China, which basically would have meant to our detriment. You know, they are yours, aap sambhalo inko. It was around the same period of time. So it is no coincidence that a reticent India worked in some sense benefited China.
Yeah.
And in many ways, had we continued with strengthening and deepening our relationship with the Americans and Europeans and Japanese and Australians and others at that particular point of time, all the eggs in the Chinese basket may not have been as deeply enmeshed as they became.
And
so
it's
everyone bet on China between, let's go back.
That period of 4 years.
That period of 4 years
Yeah.
is basically that gave birth to a expansive, aggressive China and rise of Xi Jinping's kind of geopolitics.
So in democracies like India and the US, it's something that we have to learn, that when you have these fissures and when you do not try to close those fissures, when you don't try to solve it and you don't figure out that there might be people who are taking advantage of that fissures, it results in geopolitical issues for us, which we have to then later...
Look, let me put it another way. If India stops growing at 6, 7, 8%.
Yeah.
If India goes back to its 1 or 2% growth rate, if Indian economy does badly, Indian technology progresses.
No, and we have riots and all these kind of things. If it starts internal security issues.
These matter, right?
These matter.
Right.
And why? And also they could be triggered by countries.
Look, that's a whole separate theme. You know, that's, I think, something that you should do. Look, in the digital world, and that was not the case in 2009, let's be honest here. But even at that point of time, when you didn't have the proliferation of Facebooks and Twitters and TikToks and all those other instant comm platforms like you do today, even the rapid and in many ways dangerous promotion of ideas on through videos and even podcasts, even if I say so when I'm on one, you still saw that when we wanted to put up a plant in Kundakulam, you had fisher women protesting against nuclear power.
In Tamil Nadu, correct.
In Tamil Nadu. You still saw how you had international organizations and international interest groups and international activists who could reach you and instigate protests at that particular point of time. In fact, I remember that government had come down heavily on those protests and had banned certain organizations who had been funded from overseas and who were being helped by international groups. So
these insidious things happen.
These happen, right?
Yeah.
If these happen, and if we agree that in today's world, digital means can be used to create disturbances within countries, can mobilize people to act in irrational ways, can create riots, can create conflicts, why are we assuming, why do we have this false sense of security that those who don't like us will not use it against us?
Sure.
Right? So, I have written a piece on this, that open societies, their democracy is the weapon that is used against them. Please understand, our expression and our defense of expression it will be gamed against us. We have to start with that assumption that because we can say what we want to say, we will sometimes see voices that have been actually encouraged by others to say some things that will create disturbances in our society.
So, do we guard against it? Do we take action against it? Or do we just accept it and counter it?
Look, I have a slightly nuanced view on this.
Since you work for a think tank, obviously, multiplicity of views is something that you encourage.
No, and my think tank itself has multiplicity of views.
Yeah.
So, just on that, let me just tell you that one of the things that we are deeply concerned about is the polarization of thinking within institutions. The idea of big tents is disappearing.
Yeah.
Right? We want a unifocal view of the world. Whether you're a newspaper, whether you are a think tank, whether you are a university, we want...
State your purpose.
Yeah. We want purpose-driven recruitment.
True.
And the purpose is not available to anyone. The purpose is decided by the institution. That this is the purpose.
But ये तो think tanks में America में था ही. You know what the Atlantic Council is. You know what the Heritage Foundation is. Multiplicity of views in media or in... We expect that in India it should be there. Where is it there in America?
Look, I think it would be detrimental to the story of India if we were to ape the American system of polarization. In fact, I think the richness of India's story was that we were never a country that, in fact, someone had mentioned that we were not a melting pot, we were a thali. Shashi had mentioned in your podcast. That's right.
Multiplicity of views.
Yeah.
Is like,
So we were always the thali, which had individual containers having different identities, cultures, cuisines, costumes, etc., etc., etc.
You know, when the Prime Minister is going now, 100%, already there have been reports that there are several organizations which are going to be having rallies, protests. You're going to have the Khalistanis coming and protesting. Incidentally, people don't know this, or some people don't know this, that the Khalistanis have been protesting against an Indian Prime Minister visit in America or in Canada. Forever.
Correct.
It's those who covered the visit, no कि यहाँ पे 15-20 आएंगे और ये protest करेंगे.
In fact, if I remember as a child, one of those moments that gives you when you're proud about your Prime Minister, when you're proud about some event or some incident, was actually the response Rajiv Gandhi in his visit to US at that particular time gave to a gentleman, a supporter of Khalistan. Yeah. I think in the press club or in one of his interactions, and he says that you must know that the capital of Raja Ranjit Singh's
and
kingdom,
you can have your Khalistan
Lahore
here.
Or something. In Lahore.
So वहाँ पे करने दो.
So this is going to happen.
When these kind of protests happen, or when there's this organization which has written to the president, the organization which hosted Rahul Gandhi's visit, they've written to the American president saying disallow the Indian Prime Minister from speaking at the US Congress. So when all this happens, there's a section of Indians who feel, why doesn't America stop them? Why doesn't America do something about it? Not realizing it's like our country. हम लोग नहीं stop
tell me
कर सकते.
something.
हाँ.
Okay, just go on to your Twitter timeline or your Twitter feed or whichever one for you, recommended for you, whichever one you want, whichever one Elon Musk has decided for you. Go and look at your timeline. Don't we as people with the ability to write tweets or write columns or participate in podcasts criticize America
Sure.
With all gusto and we talk about everything about them. Look, this is fine. I don't think we should we have to move on. As people, we have different assessments of the world, different views of the world. And here I come back again to my point that there is a real state and there is a street.
Yeah, when you talked about the elite.
I talked about the elite, the strategic elite.
Yes.
And so is the case.
Point.
So is
That's
the case
true.
with India.
Okay.
I mean, I can bet my bottom dollar that if tomorrow, I'm just asking, if 24, 29, 33, whenever, if a different political party comes to power, do you think they're going to undo the geostrategic directions of this country? No. In fact, what strengthens the India-US partnership is that through Vajpayee, Manmohan Singh, Modi, nothing changed. Yeah. Through Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden, nothing changed. This is the bipartisan nature of our relationship. Now, there was not one moment through this period that I'm listing here, when you did not have a very loud commentariat abusing each other or finding faults in each other or saying someone, don't trust someone, don't believe in them, their values are different, their interests are different, they will ditch us, they will do... as countries that love our own voice and love melodrama and drama. That's why Hollywood and Bollywood dominate the world. We are performers. Right? Now, politics has become more performative, and therefore politicians have also joined the frame. And because politicians now have a mic all the time, which is their mobile phone, you see much greater degree of interventions made by individuals. Sometimes it may sound a bit disorienting. There is a degree of dissonance, but the real states, the real establishments have not deviated.
Yeah.
And I think this has to be a part of two large, loud democracies working together. This will be part of it. We have to get used to this.
Right.
We are not going to convince 300 million of 350 million Americans and 1.4 billion Indians on a single line for each other.
We shouldn't get very emotive about editorials in the Washington Post, New York Times, Economist, or should we take them seriously as to that the elite might get influenced by these editorials?
No, I think...
Which are quite clearly anti-India prejudice in them.
Look, I think we need to respond to those in a few ways. One, when there is the telltale signs of racism, of Orientalism, of literally condescension, they must be called out. But it doesn't mean that the expectation has to be that White House should stop the newspapers from writing that.
Correct. So called out how? Like what Vajpayee said, kitab kar jawab kitab se.
Correct.
So,
and you have your mediums.
So you have
come
op-ed
to
ka jawab
come to
op-ed.
ANI and say what you want to say about CNN.
Thank you.
Right. And people are doing it. And
Yeah.
by the way, you don't even need to come to ANI. Now you have individual influencers on YouTube.
Yeah.
You have you have a million channels with million views.
Correct.
You know, Neil Mohan from YouTube, who now heads YouTube, was telling me that there's been a 61% growth in that particular year. I think it was 2022 of Indians earning more than 1 lakh rupees from YouTube for through
Yeah.
Through their viewership.
Yeah.
So there is a whole explosion of content used because of the digital medium.
So
all
we've
of
got
us,
the numbers, right?
We got the
we
numbers.
got 1.4 billion of ours.
Correct. So
Just
I
some.
think they should be called out, and
Right.
I think words are a good response to words.
And do think tanks call out too? Since you
All the
work in
time.
thing, you do.
I mean, think tanks call out each other even in India. Forget about America. So,
Okay.
so you have. By the way, I can take pride in this. That many years ago, if you remember, there was this big debate of whether India should opt for Rafale or for the F-16s. If you remember,
Yes.
there was this big debate happening when we were going
Yes.
for our that first procurement, and. I had one of my colleagues strongly pitch on the same day, Times of India for one aircraft, and Hindustan Times, my other colleague wrote for the other aircraft. So even within think tanks,
Sure.
there would be difference of opinions. And I think that is what I was referring to earlier, that this ability to have different opinions and yet celebrate a common future should not be lost.
Okay.
Indians always had it. हम फर्क हैं. We were different. We were never the same. We were different in terms of religion, different in terms of our eating habits, different in terms of how we view our cultural norms and cultural processes. From our birth to our death, we had differences
Sure.
that defined different sections of India. Yet we were living in the same space, sharing the same present, and dreaming of the same future. And I think the ability to celebrate diversity was something that we were known for, and we are known for. By the way, I don't
that's what I want to know.
I don't want to believe New York Times and Guardian, right? So I think unko padha karo and usme bhel puri khaya karo. That they are very good to eat bhel puri and serve bhel purian, but do not allow others to define who we are. And I truly believe that beyond the noise and beyond the 8,000 Twitter handles in India who wake up every morning and abuse everyone and say that their freedom of expression is being denied. And by the way, they've been doing it for a decade now.
Yeah.
So, and clearly their expression does not seem to have vanished anywhere.
Absolutely. They're going and screeching on television channels
every
at
day,
the debate.
every day. Right? So,
screaming that our voices are not being heard
so-
while they
so I-
scream the
so-
loudest.
So I'm saying, don't believe us.
Okay.
Don't believe people like us. Go to the streets. Go to small town India. Go to the big markets of India. Go to the big cities and the dense clusters in India. We are a country of 1.4 billion people, largely living in harmony. Now, one incident per day for one country is not news. Unfortunately, because we are 70 countries, if we have 70 incidents in one country, it becomes news.
Yeah.
But if you really were to look at the incidents that happen vis-a-vis the population that we house, India is a country that is largely doing well. My only cautionary assessment is that sometimes the social media starts infecting real streets and
Yeah.
real populations.
Absolutely.
And now with smartphones and with the spread of access to everyone in the last certainly since 2016-17, we should be careful. We should be careful, and therefore I think and this is a different theme, and I want to come back to the US relationship very quickly. But I think this is an area where governments, communities, citizens need to get smarter so that we are able to prevent. There needs to be a preventive strategy so that what you see online does not infect real life.
Okay.
And that danger is something we should be aware of.
True.
I don't think it is necessarily prolific at this stage, but there are enough incidents that have happened in the last few years which tell us that
Time to take a relook at
it's
it.
time to relook at both
Impact.
both the role of communities, the role of regulation, and of course the role of the family itself.
Yeah.
Because in a country which is as family and community oriented as we are, the first and the most important line of defense is the locality and the
When
family.
we're talking about social media, you can be certain that with this visit of Prime Minister Modi, as much as traditional media is going to be reporting on what the bare facts are and what the drama element in it, because of course Prime Minister Modi is going to speak to the diaspora. There'll be a state banquet, so there'll be pomp and pageantry. Of course, American pomp and pageantry is not as much as in India. They do it in a more subtle manner, but there will be all that. So the traditional media will focus on that, but social media will also focus on the other side of it also. The protests and things like that. So. Is the hype justified in both social media as well as traditional media about this visit?
Look, we were just talking about the Manmohan Singh Vajpayee years of the relationship.
Yeah.
And I was suggesting that was a period when we laid to rest the demons of the 20th century. We perhaps also decided to script a new future. This is that future. This visit is that future.
Okay.
So if that was the preface of the book in the early 2000s, this is now the main book being written.
Wonderful.
This visit is where we are actually, after having heard everyone, you're good, he's bad, this is the problem, that is the issue, they are capable of doing this or they are capable of doing that. We have heard everyone. We have assessed each other. We have, played aloof, played warm, played friendly. We have played all the games with each other. This is it. There couldn't be two dissimilar leaders driving this relationship, and there couldn't be greater convergence between these leaders as it is happening now. Now, this visit, the Biden and Prime Minister Modi, is extremely different because of not only the different personalities of the leadership, but because despite the different personalities, the common convergence and determination to carve a relationship that will serve the future. And this is that relationship. This is not a period when we are promising that we will work together. This is the period of great transition happening in the world. We have a Europe in disarray. We have a China that is promising to upset everything. We have just come out of a pandemic that has derailed economic futures. We have, of course, and most importantly, crises such as climate change confronting all of us. And we have restless populations within our countries and, of course, outside. So this is a very, very different era, a very different time period when our two countries are deciding to do something dramatic together.
So that trust and verify stage we have gone.
That trust, verify, distrust, verify, verify, don't trust, all combinations have been now
done
exhausted.
And dusted. Okay.
And we have come to the conclusion, this is it.
So now, if it was nuts and bolts, if I was to pick two things, defense and technology, are those two the shining?
No, they're not two things. Defense and technology is one thing.
Okay.
That is one thing.
All right.
So I think defense and technology is one thing. And we can add a few more because...
You can add space, IT, all those
so
things.
So as soon as you put tech, it
Yeah.
implicates defense, it implicates climate, it implicates space, it implicates literally every sector of our lives today, because in a digital future, tech is a
The reason
central
is
element.
everybody's focus are on the drones and the engines for the
No,
LCA.
but they must focus.
Yeah.
Look, they must focus on it. And I know some of my very dear friends have a different opinion on this. But look, let's wait for the deal. What we are seeing here is actually, for the first time, an attempt by the US to share one of its crown jewels with a country that is not its alliance partner, aka vassal state. For the first time, you have a country that disagrees with the US on as many issues as it agrees on.
Yeah.
For the first time, US is saying that I am going to give you a few things that were earlier only reserved for those who would do my bidding.
UK and Canada and the others.
Whoever. I mean, I'm not
Okay,
naming them, so
Japanese,
you know,
everybody,
why
yeah.
should
Okay.
I upset any
Sure, okay.
any population?
But that's a policy change in America, you would say. That
look,
yeah, isn't it?
See, it's a policy change in America. I don't think it's a policy change in America. I think it's a realization in America
Okay.
that when you partner with India, you are now no longer dealing with small states who are looking up to you. You are dealing with a state that looks into your eyes. And I think that is the emergence of India that they have now realized has happened. The India that they wanted, that they were leveraging in 2000 as a potential partner for the future, has emerged. And they have realized that that India is going to have the same sense of exceptionalism, that India is going to play with everyone like they have done. I mean, by the way, the Americans have funded every side of every conflict since 1945, right? So, in every region of the world, right?
Sanuki, na, as long as they never funded us, right? Till now.
The point is, Americans realize that large countries with a strong sense of self don't have unifocal lenses. They don't look at the world in straight lines. They look at the world in a more complex matrix. Matrix of opportunity, matrix of possibilities, matrix that issues that respond to the current times, issues that might be important in the future times. There is a large array of inputs that define decisions. For the first time, US is going to be partnering with a country so intimately, which is going to be bigger than it in population and bigger than a PPP GDP terms in some years' time. So for the first time, US is confronted with an economy nearly as big as itself in a decade and a half, 2 decades from now, perhaps bigger than it in a few decades from now.
Would they be okay with that?
Why not?
They're not okay with China being that. So why would they be okay with India being that?
Because India, as of now, has not shown two essential attributes that would threaten and scare people. The first, disregard for the rules that have largely defined the liberal order post 1945. In fact, India has been more committed to the treaties and to some of the frameworks and agreements than even the United States of America. Adherence to international law, adherence to its commitments, adherence to what it has promised to do. It has been far more committed to the order, as it were, than most countries, including the United States of America. That's number one. So we don't have a disregard for international law and international order and international agreements. That's number one. The Chinese have never lived up to any agreement, right? The WTO accession is a joke on the Europeans and the Americans. That's still playing out, by the way. So it's still not over, right? So that's number one. So we don't have that. And second, it is widely accepted around the world, and it's not only the Americans, but it's true for most countries, that we are not seen as an expansive actor who wants to reshape the political maps of the world. We are not seen as a country that is going to go and run an imperial agenda or a.
We say we want to be Vishwaguru.
Vishwaguru is, look, boss, our Vishwaguru is linked to the mind.
The mysticism of it.
No, mysticism, you're reducing us to mysticism. Boss, we were also the mathematicians of our time. We were also the scientists in different times. Mysticism was a reductive term to give them a reason to colonize us. Mysticism was not something that gave them great appreciation for us. Okay. It was a way to reduce us.
तो हम लोग replace करने की नहीं सोच रहे. We are not out there to.
हम किसी को replace नहीं कर रहे और हम किसी की line toe भी नहीं कर रहे.
All right.
We will make our decisions, and our decisions over time have proven to be those which conform to international sensibilities, our global commitments and responsibilities, and of course, as we are trying to demonstrate quite vocally during our G20 presidency, which places humanity, the emerging world, and the planet.
Samir, Ashley Tellis, he's a known India expert. Now, he says that, and he's been quoted a lot on this article, and he says America's made a bad bet on India and that New Delhi will not side Washington against Beijing. Now, younger Ashley Tellis had a more optimistic view about India-US relations. And there are several such articles which have come out. Do you think India should side more with the US to convince people like Ashley or the others, Markey and the others, Daniel Markey and those who have written on it, to say that India is not a bad bet? Would Modi would have to
let me
walk
ask
that
you,
extra
let me
mile?
ask, okay, now let me change the role. I'm going to ask you a question. Do you think if India was able to convince Ashley Tellis and Daniel Markey and other commentators, US would be fine with us? I mean, do you think that's the route for convincing the US about us?
Comes back to that elite thing
No,
that you
my
talked
point
about.
here is, I have a simple proposition. There is a school of voices in both parts of in India as well as in the US, on both sides, which have considered opinions, which have strong opinions, which have a view that is certainly something that catches attention and engages all of us. But the question we need to ask is that view the view of the United States of America or of New Delhi?
But see, when these articles come out just on the eve of Prime Minister Modi's visit to the US, and this is going to be the last visit probably of Prime Minister Modi before America goes to polls, before India goes to polls. Even if he goes again, it's not. I mean,
No. Look,
So-
are these views going to change American election outcomes? No.
Okay.
Are they going to change American decision on foreign policy? No. Are they going to impact India's foreign policy approaches? No. Why are we so uncomfortable with people having views that don't matter? You know, why is it that everything has to have some end purpose in it? Boss, you know, there is when I was doing my PhD and I was sitting in UK in some town, and I was having coffee, and the person who was sitting next to me in the cafe was scribbling some notes. I asked him, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm writing my PhD." I said, "You're writing your PhD on a piece of paper?" He says, "I am a pure mathematics PhD. My job is to find the prime number in some exponential series, some 13th exponential series or some number, I'm forgetting exactly. He has to discover a prime number of the largest that has ever been found. That was his PhD, that I'm going to find the prime number at some point." Maine kaha, "What is the purpose of this prime number?" He says, "No purpose. Finding the prime number is the purpose." So the discovery of the prime number was the purpose. It is not going to change the politics of Cambridge or the price of the coffee.
Foreign policy ke PhDs bhi aise,
The
no?
point I'm trying to make is
Okay.
that there is sometimes a joy of doing things. And why do you want to take away that joy? There is everything is not linked to outcomes.
It's not going to impact on the visit at all?
You answered the question I asked you, that if what Daniel Markey writes, is it going to change the way Mr. Doval or Mr. Jaishankar or Prime Minister Modi think? Answer that question for me. Does it matter to them? Same. Is Daniel Markey going to affect how White House thinks about it?
Okay, let me be
If they
devil's-
did, let's assume that Daniel Markey and others that you have mentioned had the power to influence the relationship at this time, do you think we would be here? Let's be honest here, that everyone has a moment. And let us not forget that many important voices in the late 1990s and early 2000s, including Ashley, played an important role in giving birth to a new moment in India-US relationships. It's been 20 years since then. We are literally talking about end of a generation. There is a new generation of voices and thinkers, of doers, of practitioners, of policymakers who are in charge today. They have a very different assessment of the world. They were possibly in the classrooms when the relationship began afresh. And it is those voices that we should be pointing to when we start thinking about implications for the relationship. But listen, these voices are also important because they tell you A, how far we have come, B, what we should prevent, what we should guard against. So I think there are also cautionary messages in there. But in my mind, let's be very clear, commentariat on both sides, which has grabbed media spaces, whether digital or real, are not connected to what's really transforming the relationship. I think I'll say, despite me being from a think tank, I think track 2 is far behind track 1. Track 1 is track 1 is leading the relationship.
Correct.
In the 90s and 2000s, we used to pull the track 1, come and do this.
Yeah.
In the 2020s, We are nowhere close to what the track one is doing and implementing and enacting. We are retrospective thinkers on these matters.
Also, the secrecy involved. No,
Look, it is not secret.
the nuts and bolts of these defense cooperation deals have not yet come out. On the iCET thing, I read your article. My question, Samir, is on, I want to come to that. It's this level of cooperation, it needs a deep kind of trust, longevity of planning and things like that. These verticals can't kickstart just like that, just because two governments decide. There has to be, all like your scientists, your researchers, your industry, everybody have to be on board. Are they on board? Here's a short primer. The Indian National Security Advisor this week said that the India-US Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technologies, iCET, is going to emerge as one of the important pillars in the India-US bilateral strategic partnership. The iCET, or Initiative on Critical Area Technologies, between India and the US commits to cooperation in areas such as artificial intelligence, quantum computing, space exploration, semiconductors, and defense technology. It was launched in January this year, and considerable work has gone into this. Stakeholders from the government, industry, and academia, scientists, research scholars have been part of the process of putting up platforms and processes to deepen the cooperation.
I think when it comes to, if you're talking about tech transfers or tech partnerships or, key issues like, for example, partnering on digital public infrastructure or 5G, or semiconductors, or jet engines. Look, who is the single most important actor in these domains? The private sector. So the question here is the American private sector betting on India? And I think the answer is a loud yes.
Okay.
So the American state by itself will not be able to take this forward unless it has on board the owners of these key capabilities, knowledge and products on their side. So I think the American private sector, for a number and variety of reasons, and I think that it could be resilience, it could be China plus one, it could be de-risking itself from countries which might be problematic in the future. For a variety of reasons, I think the American private sector has taken a call on India. Now, does it mean that we have to do something dramatically different? No. But we need to implement better. And by the way, I think what we did with Apple in recent times may give us some sort of a framework, roadmap, architecture. A prototype. To see how we can actually create substantial, significant, world-class manufacturing out of India. But that is not going to be replicated when we take it to the digital public infrastructure space, or the services space, or the software space, or even the jet engine space.
It may not move in the same
It may not move in the same way.
Yeah.
So I think we have to be nimble and alert. And as India, we need to now, in the next 10 years, keep grabbing opportunities. They are going to come knocking, and we must keep the door open. I think our problem is, like the commentariat that is writing about the 20th century, even some of our bureaucracy is living in the 20th century. So the 21st opportunities need to be grabbed by a far more agile bureaucratic class. I think the political leadership is far more aware and in tune with what we could achieve in the days ahead. I think we need more agile institutions, and both sides. By the way, this is not an India problem. It is also a US problem. Most of your friends who have been ambassadors here, etc., will tell you that they have to move the needle through the maze of Pentagon and the State Department.
And one of the major issues will be visas. Indians have this, the backlog goes several years now on the H-1B.
America has to understand, and I've written about this, by the way.
Yes.
I've actually complained about the backlogs. Although, to be honest, we garner the giant share of all the visas.
That's 70%, 75%. But
listen,
country
the
quota.
Americans have to now not think about, okay, here is my take on it. Visas should not be seen as a allotment or a distribution of largesse. The India-US relationship, visa should be seen as the most strategic bridge between the two countries. It is our people who have built this relationship. Boss, when our politics hated each other, when our geopolitics was different, it was the people in the two countries and the diaspora that kept us connected. We have a human bridge. That human bridge is a strategic bridge. We should see this as the pipeline that is literally the most significant one between our two. This is the energy pipeline. This is the equivalent of the energy pipeline that's flowing between us people. So Visa
Brilliant.
is not a distribution network. Visa is a strategic highway. And it allows, the human bridge allows us to do things that would have been improbable and impossible but for its existence. So my plea to leaders on both sides is to treat the flow of human capital between the two geographies as essential to preserve the essence of our relationship. It was built by them and it is going to be served by them. It is going to be grown by them.
Okay, let me get to this Bloomberg article which I read. And according to one estimate, there are 277,000 people across the US who are working on this chip making industry in R&D, design, manufacturing, testing, semiconductor and things. Now, there will be about 10,000 jobs available every year in this sector. In India, we have about 2.5 million Indians enrolling in engineering colleges. The math is there, right? Are we, firstly, one, you said that US sees us as a capable partner. Have we developed the skill sets to match that, those jobs which are going to come out here? Are our youth trained for those jobs?
Now this is a sector where I don't have ready numbers with me, but I do remember Minister Rajiv Chandrasekhar mentioning in one of our conferences when I asked him this question. He was mentioning that a significant part of the design is already done out of India. And many and most,
and he would know, he's worked
correct,
on it. Yeah.
and he is quite focused on building those capabilities and further building those capabilities here. In fact, many companies have their offices here that take part in this particular exercise. So if I remember correctly, he was mentioning that we are already an integral part of this industry in some ways, and we should become more deeply integrated into it. Now, look, this again becomes that visa question.
Yeah.
Right? Now, if Americans require Indian talent, then, and this is a strategic sector, you're not giving a tourist visa here.
Yeah.
You are investing in your own country's strategic abilities
And
to
you're
cater
noticing now, right from President Biden to all the other congressmen, senators, everybody says, oh, it is going to bring so many jobs to our state. And for Americans to say that doing business with India is going to provide jobs in their country, they're not worried about their jobs being taken away.
No, look.
Do you remember Obama
Correct.
in that early thing, he says, oh, Bangaloreans are going to take up your job.
we are going to be Bangalored. He had come up with the term.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And now...
And they would be eating sweet sambar.
It's the best kind of sambar, Samir.
Look, I've lived in that part and I love that sambar.
Yeah, okay.
By
This
the
is
way,
the
Dakshin
Manipal.
Kannada. Yeah, Dakshin Kannada. So
Yeah.
my Dakshin Kannada origins. Huh?
Yeah, so there.
No. But on a note, see, look, I think at a particular point of time, and not too far away from now, and I see this within a decade, India will have to be attracting a lot of global talent into India. We may make in India, but we will make with everyone. No big country has built alone, except China, who stole everything from everyone. But even they needed the knowledge of others who they were able to bring it back. But by the way, look, that was slightly uncharitable.
They also need the quotas of the other countries.
When the financial crisis hit, and let me tell you a China story. When the financial crisis hit, what did the Chinese do? Chinese came up with 2-3 schemes. One of them was, the Chinese government, one of them was that if you are a person with skills and capabilities who's working in Western institutions, losing your job, come back to China, we'll protect your salary, we'll give you a job here. There was a come back to China policy. And they had tens of thousands of folks who returned home and took part in building China from 2008 to now, who built up the capabilities of China. What is intellectual property? When people move between two labs, they take their knowledge with them. So when you bring back the folks who are working in critical sectors in the United States and they've built up their own laboratories and research facilities in China, this was a tech transfer of a soft variety, of a lower cost variety, perhaps also of something that was not consistent with copyright norms. But the Chinese don't really care about it, so they bought back a lot of people. They had a policy that got them back. Second, progressively since the last decade, they have targeted key Chinese origin Americans or Chinese diaspora in America, in Europe, in Canada, and other parts of the world, and they have brought them back to the mainland. They have also attracted the best American and non-Chinese American and European talent to come and work with them. Literally, by the way, that is the influence they wield on the world, because so many Harvard and East Coast professors have side assignments in China, who come and advise them on their economic policies, on their trade policies, on their engineering, on their physics, on their chemistry. You can take out a roster of American academics who have an honorarium deal with the Chinese, and they are giving them advice or shaping their futures as well. So India, maybe not in that style, but I see very soon India requiring, as we move from say $5 trillion, which hopefully we should be touching in the next couple of years. If we have to move from 5 to 10 and from 10 to 20, we will have to solicit help from across the world, seek global talent, attract them to come and work here, and create jobs for America out of India. So, we are going to be a job producer for the world. It's not only about ourselves. And there lies that challenge. So, I think rather than looking at it as a zero-sum game, we have to see that there are certain jobs that are going to go from India to Western or other geographies for the capabilities that they have. And there are many Indians who go into different geographies for the skills that they bring to the table. And I think you're going to see this flow, this human capital movement is going to be far more robust in both directions. Today it is more one-sided. Today you see it is India exporting talent. But in the future we will be importing skill sets from around the world.
Yeah. Samir, now let me get on to the work that you do. Tell me about Observer Research Foundation, and to those who don't know what a think tank does. What does a think tank do? Demystify it. I've been to your Raisina Dialogues. It's a flagship event now. It's on the calendar of everybody who studies foreign policy, who works in the field. Everybody wants to be part of that Raisina Dialogue. So tell me, what are the goals? How does one get into a think tank? What does a think tank do? What do your policy papers mean? How does it formulate policy in the country?
Smita, this is a difficult question. But let me try and present it simply in bite-sized answers. Essentially, what we seek to do as a think tank and as Observer Research Foundation is to offer ideas and policy frameworks that would be useful for a country such as India. And I'm talking about ORF India here. So our job essentially is to come up with ideas and proposals for India to embrace, to work with, to in many ways embrace, to meet its national objectives. Job creation, economic growth, national security, digitalization, responding to climate change, empowering women, responding to the agrarian and agricultural and food security questions, blue economy, urban planning, electricity and water and everything under the sun. I think the only 2 or 3 domains we don't engage in would be culture, literature, maybe some bit of, and of course we don't work on elections and domestic politics.
Okay.
Right? We are not necessarily focused on that, but we would work on questions of legislative reforms or democratic reforms or best practices from the world. What can we learn about citizen empowerment and strengthening the public sphere, giving voice to communities. We do that in a way which does where we deploy a few things. One, of course, is writing and research, where we like any good researcher, reams of previous writings, engagement with communities and stakeholders who are most affected or implicated or in position to affect transformations. Then discussions with that draft with the larger community, take their feedback and correct course, then bring it out and publish it. Sometimes if it's a very important issue, even disseminate in larger gatherings and do that. So that's largely the bread and butter. How do we create a policy idea that is needed at that particular point of time? Since because we have now just created, we have just given mobile phones to everyone. What are the goods and bads? How do we manage the goods and bads? How do we make sure it's equally distributed? How do we make sure certain sections are not left behind? How do we make sure certain bads of the real world don't flow into the digital world? How do we make sure that the harms that can come in the use of those technologies can be protected? So typically we would take a real world issue and see what are the kind of frameworks around it that would be more efficient, that would be safe, that would be equitable, and that would empower. Right? That is the job of a think tank, to advise societies, governments, private sector on governance, policies and regulations that make a particular area or a particular sector better for citizens and peoples. Right? That's one part of the think tank. But look, think tanks today are also playing some other roles. The other roles are that in a globalized world, we are also required to build global communities. You cannot say that globalization means more trade, but we should not be having exchange of ideas and we should not be discussing the same theme across the table with different countries. So academics should be local, but trade is global. That doesn't work that way, right? So our job is also, as think tanks today, to engage with a much wider constituency outside the border. Infect them with our ideas, get infected by them with their ideas. Sometimes come up with common solutions and common frameworks that we then position to our individual governments or our own industries.
And those
people.
cause positive disruptions, you feel?
Sometimes they call negative disruption as well. But it depends where you sit, right? For anything that is positive for a certain constituency alters the status quo for some other.
Yeah.
So no disruption can be one-sided.
How do you quantify success in, like, suppose you've done something for climate change? How do you quantify because of a policy change that a government did or something on the ground?
I mean, look, if your writings or if your research is shaping policy, that would clearly be success. But depending if that policy is beneficial, if your research leads to a policy that has dramatic consequences, then that's not necessarily successful research.
Yeah.
So I think we have to be more humble.
थोड़ा सा एक एग्जांपल दे दो, like if as a think
देखिए मैं
tank-
आपको एक एग्जांपल देता हूँ. अब लोग राइसीना डायलॉग में बहुत साल पहले की बात बताता हूँ. 2016-17 we were trying to bring all the head of navies of the 4 countries, Quad countries, to the stage, and it was not an easy thing, right? We would have various, and I would not name any country here, but we would have suggestions from some of the Quad countries that why only have these 4. Why don't we bring some other country also? Bring a France, bring a Indonesia, bring a UK. If you put these 4, then the focus will be on the Quad. But that was what I wanted. I wanted focus on Quad, right? Because Quad was something that many of us believe was important to bring to the front. But look, so we started that into 5, 6, 7 years ago. We started with Harry Harris, who was the Pacific commander, and I must salute him. He held the line. Reached out to all his counterparts, put them all in the room. We also had a 5th country to dilute the implications of it. But look, last year we had the 4 foreign ministers sitting at Raisina. How far have we travelled? That we were reticent to be alone on the stage at the level of the naval commanders, but we had 4 foreign ministers sitting on the stage 1 hour before Lavrov spoke at Raisina.
And then what happens when criticism comes in that these kind of events are talk shops? You have speeches like ocean is a vast space. That's how it begins with the naval commanders.
No, but I listened to all
Concrete mein aata hai. Like, I know how you started it when you said, why are you smiling? When the 4 of them came out, the Quad ministers came out and said, why are you smiling? I'm suspicious. What happened there?
No. Look, nothing happened there. I was just asking that, do you guys have a WhatsApp group? Do you exchange, do you coordinate, so they didn't tell me. I tried to get an answer, but they didn't tell me. But that's not the point. The question here is this. Look, yes, it's a talk shop. You can criticize it.
Yeah.
But it's also a message. When 4 people walk out on the stage and show that degree of comfort with each other, when 4 of them respond to questions on issues, and you could see there's a degree of consonance in what they say, It's a message.
And you had the Russians and you had the Americans on
Correct.
the same platform.
On the same platform.
When they are almost at war.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's a message. What was the message coming out of that conference? The message is clear that this grouping is here to stay. They are comfortable. They are going to meet, confabulate, coordinate, and take this to its logical next step, which is deeper relationship, which is shaping the region, which is serving their individual and collective ambitions. And it's also a message that you are doing it even though you have others in the room from countries who are not necessarily comfortable with this grouping. And yet, the message here is not that they are uncomfortable. The message here is that I will have a relationship with that country and I'll have a relationship with the Quad. I think that is also a message. And these are equally important as messaging tools, which, by the way, the Munich Security Conference or some other, the Shangri-La Dialogue continuously do. The messaging is, for example, look at what happened in Shangri-La this year. You had the American DefSec who comes and speaks on day one, the Chinese DefSec, so the defense minister who comes and speaks on day two. There is a messaging there. It comes out, there's a handshake, there is a walk. It also happened at Raisina. So you had Mr. Blinken and Lavrov meeting there.
Yes.
On that occasion, they were here for the G20, of course.
And it's probably an India or an Indian-based think tank which can bring
India.
these-
I think think tank is less important here. I think, let's be honest here, this is India.
India.
If our strength is that we can bring the world together, why should we not be using that as an attribute that India
How do you
brings
see
to the
the
global
neighborhood seeing India's rise like this? You were saying...
by the way, you should look at the Pakistani TV channels and the reportage on Raisina. Look, they appreciate it.
Yeah.
By the way, I must tell you this. It seems that the Pakistani television channels are far more appreciative of what we do than our own TV and media and commentariat is. They are
हम तो रह गए वाला scene होता है
हाँ
उनके
नहीं
साथ.
वो ठीक है पर वो भी यूज करते हैं अपने एजेंडा को of course.
But all the countries, see, all the smaller countries, it's not nice for a smaller country to see, if you're in a competitive spirit, to see your neighborhood, one country in the neighborhood occupy a large space.
I disagree there.
Unless you have a mature leadership which says, okay, here is a country, $3 trillion economy,
Look,
let's latch a wagon to this country and we will rise with them.
But there are enough voices in the Pakistani media, the ones that are accessible on YouTube, the ones that I watch. And I must tell you that midnight every day, I spend 45 to 50 minutes skimming through the YouTube content on Pakistan.
That's
television.
probably because Sushant Sareen is sitting and telling
No,
you
that
to
is
do
because I don't want Sushant Sareen's view of Pakistan alone.
Okay.
I want to see some other view as well. But Sushant is a dear colleague and friend, and I have clearly he has a significant impact on my assessment of Pakistan.
It's also because it's blowing up in the neighborhood, so you want to know what's happening.
I want to
in
know
that.
what's happening,
Yeah.
and I've been doing this for years now. By the way, I've been doing this for years. I've been watching, since YouTube made it easy for us to watch some
But
of
it's
the
also,
shows.
see, Samir, Bangladesh. They don't like the idea, because when I say Bangladesh, I mean Sheikh Hasina. She doesn't like the idea of India-US getting closer together. There's an inherent suspicion she has. Or maybe a Bhutan. Does that push them closer to China as a result of India going closer to the US? So it's not just, and what happens with Nepal. How do they see it? It's not just Pakistan. That's a
Look, I'll tell
weird
you
country
our
anyway.
reality. Our reality is that, and it's been there for a while now, our reality is that we have to develop postures and muscles to respond to a very aggressive large country called China in our neighborhood. By the way, they are our biggest neighbor and they are our longest border.
Yeah.
And they are a hotly contested border. So we have to build ourselves and prepare ourselves and keep ourselves ready to respond to China. But that building up and preparing and making ourselves ready sometimes may intimidate the smaller ones.
Yeah.
And that is a dichotomy we need to deal with, that we have to be ready for X and we sometimes ruffle Y. But look, that's why diplomacy matters. That's why these events matter. That's why outreach at the track 2 level matters. That's why academic and non-official communication is equally important. And think tanks have to sometimes play that role as well. That in a world where the political official positions are responding to a set of challenges, they have effect on different actors. And we have to use different means to allow them. So a think tank is today in many ways not just doing research as its primary job, but also engagement, also investing in the next generation of leaders and preparing them for leadership, also global communities and nurturing cadre of believers in certain issues that are important, be it digital transformations, be it climate response, be it water, be it some other critical questions for humanity. So a think tank today is a very, very wide space. And everyone from those who love writing and research, to those who love convenings and comms, to those who want to build communities and platforms, to those who want to create digital content and send key messages to the world. A think tank today is what you make of it. And literally you could do everything. We of course have limitations in terms of the talent pool who's interested in this. So my appeal through your podcast is to those who are listening in, do consider think tanks as a viable career. It prepares you for lots of skills. You can invest into sectors that you're interested in. You can get great jobs and consulting assignments and private sector placements if you have worked here. Many of my young folks who have done 2, 3, 4, 5 years are heading public relations or government relations in corporations, in digital companies, in renewable energy companies, in strategic risk.
Because you
firms.
work everybody to the bone.
No. Look,
I've seen you at Raisina.
Look, we all work because think tanks have a capacity question as well, right? We don't have unlimited budgets.
Yeah,
we also don't have
true.
unlimited human resources.
Yeah.
So between the two of them, think tanks are a place where you have to work as a team.
Yes.
Every hand on the deck.
It's a small tribe which does everything.
Right.
It's incredible.
Right. But it is it is very immersive. And very productive. And
you've just come back from Kigali. Tell us about that before we wind up.
No, Kigali is it's so refreshing. When you leave Europe and North America and some of the OECD countries and reach Africa, Latin America, parts of Asia, you see hope, you see positivity, you see smiles, you see optimism, you see aspirations, you see a glee. You can see the eyes which are bright and shining and gleaming. You see people who are waiting for tomorrow.
Interesting.
And that is like a battery recharge for us. Sometimes when we all we hear about, all we experience in other parts is doom and gloom. Yeah. So Kigali makes us more human. My conference in Kigali is the human conference, where it's people first, humans first. Questions of food and jobs and agency and are far more vital. You don't look. You were in Kigali. I don't know how many times was the word Ukraine mentioned or Russia mentioned. Hardly ever. It's a different planet, literally, right? And by the way, so many Europeans participated, and they came and said, "Oh my God, this conference is totally different. We don't hear of this anymore. If you are in a European conference, you'll hear Ukraine. You'll
gas prices and de-dollarization,
so even
and
for
all
them,
those.
it is eye-opening. That there is a world that looks at the world very differently. That is there whose expectation from tomorrow is markedly different, right? Okay. So Kigali for me is always a pleasure, and I think we need to look at Africa and the countries in that continent as the most vital and important partners for us in the decades ahead. We are going to grow together. We are joined at the hips. We are going to literally be the two geographies. In fact, I sometimes call it the Afro-Asian century. It is not an Asian century. It is an Afro-Asian century. The 21st century is going to be shaped by the countries in that continent, by India and others in Asia, and to some extent even in Latin America. So we have to engage far more deeply. Kigali is a way of making India aware of that part of the world. Our Indian thinkers and Indian leaders engage with that world, but also to bring other folks from different parts of the world using the Indian convening capacity and capabilities to that continent and build a community of those who are invested in the countries there, the people there. So yes, great conference. I loved it. I'm
So
in
we
charge.
began the conversation with the US. We are ending it on Africa.
No, we are ending
and
it on Africa because India and US
And-
have a responsibility
Towards
to
Africa.
that our partnership should serve the next 6 billion. The the US Europe partnership, the US Japanese partnership served the first 1 billion. The India US partnership is a partnership for the next 6.5 to 7 billion. So our partnership is for the world. That first partnership was for the elites. So our partnership is a street partnership, if we were to break it into that description again. So Africa is important even in the India-US context. And I hope that that is certainly going to be a part of what we discuss in DC.
Thank you so much, Samir. Thanks. It's very illuminating. I don't know how time has gone, and I've learned so much. I always do when I speak to you. So thanks a lot for being part of this podcast.
You're just being a friend and kind, but thank you for having me. And more power to your elbow. May you continue to host these great conversations with a whole host of people.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching or listening in to this podcast. Do like or subscribe on whichever channel you have seen this or heard this. Namaste. Jai Hind. Click here to watch the previous episodes.